Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. As today, of course, and I know most of you have already been briefed in detail, so I won't repeat the budget for you, but we've unveiled today Budget 2021. It provides a roadmap to a safer and healthier Manitoba going forward. Our number one priority has been and continues to be protecting our vulnerable citizens. We are and have been focused on creating an environment where people could feel safe, but also where people could feel an opportunity could be pursued here in our province, opportunities for economic growth and recovery, and moving our provincial budget back into a situation that we had worked hard to get it to, where it was more sustainable and balanced. Over the next few years, it's going to take time to clean up this pandemic mess, and we're facing that today with this budget. When we formed government 5 years ago, we made a vow to Manitobans that we would focus on fixing our finances, repairing our services, rebuilding economy. We kept our word, and now we're going to have to do it again. We succeeded last year in balancing our budget, but it should be noted we did that while at the same time maintaining the number one highest level per capita of investment in health, education, and families in the country of Canada, and we did it while also lowering the tax burden on Manitoba families and Manitoba small businesses. Now, of course, with this pandemic, these steps that we have taken have shown that they can pay off by moving to manage our finances better over the last number of years, by investing in resilience preparedness to strengthen our position. It enabled us as a government to face the unprecedented challenge of this COVID-19 pandemic head on. So I guess what I'm saying is we're moving from strong to a pandemic challenge period that we're in right now, but we believe we can move to even stronger as we come out of this. In 2019, for example, we introduced the 2020 tax rollback guarantee, and that $2020 would be the savings to the average Manitoba taxpayer over a 4-year period. And Budget 2021 fulfills that commitment, actually a year ahead of schedule, because as a government, we believe now more than ever before that Manitobans deserve a break, quite frankly. They deserve to keep a little bit more of their hard-earned money, especially in these pandemic challenged times. In 2020, last year, we presented the most emergency resilient budget, arguably in Manitoba history, by moving to shift resources to make them ready and available to our rainy day fund. Previous governments had exhausted those resources, meaning you would have to go to a lending institution to borrow at a time of great need. Our rainy day fund created the opportunity for us to have ready resources available, and we strengthened that, and we've been using some of those resources. That gives us the greater financial flexibility, those decisions we made, to offer even more support and more strength to individual Manitobans at a time when they need it, and to Manitoba small businesses at a time when they need it too. We've offered throughout this pandemic, and we continue to, some of the most generous support programs in the country of Canada, and we've been able to do that as well by the work that we did over the first half decade to strengthen our financial well-being as a province. Just as Manitobans were working to strengthen their own financial circumstances, their government was doing the same thing to strengthen the ability of our government to respond to times like the ones we're in right now. As a government, I said earlier, and I'll say again, we do continue to lead, and we plan to continue to lead in investing in departments like health, education, and families, because those are where our vulnerable people are counting on support. This has been the case throughout, and today, as a government, we demonstrated that we are a government that keeps its word. I'm pleased to say that Budget 2021 provides nearly $1.5 billion of additional investments in health, education, and social services. Nous sommes un gouvernement qui tient parole. Je suis heureux de dire que le budget 2021 prévoit près de 1,5 milliard de dollars en financement accru pour les soins de santé, l'éducation, et les services sociaux combinés. Budget 2021 is focused on two key priority areas. One, protecting Manitobans from the effects of COVID-19 with record investments in healthcare, almost $7 billion, education, more than $3 billion, and families, a $34 million increase, and supports for public safety, the environment, and continued tax relief as well. And two, advancing. There's a danger, and it's human nature, I suppose, that when you're in the midst of challenging times, as we all are, that you may lose sight of the long term because you're caught up in the short term. Your government, and Manitobans deserve to know this, has not lost sight of the responsibility we have to prepare and to plan for the future. And so today we also made targeted investment commitments for Manitoba businesses and job programs, for post-secondary institutions, for strategic infrastructure projects, and I emphasize strategic. We're not throwing money away at projects just because they're ready to go. We're focusing on investing in projects that are shovel-worthy as well as shovel-ready. And I should also mention strengthening our supports for our municipal partners in our communities, which are already among the most generous in the country of Canada as well. Budget 2021 continues our commitment to making life more affordable for Manitobans. When we came in, we had some of the highest taxes in Canada, and they were the fastest rising as well. We arrested that growth in the taxes, and now we've begun to lower them so that we can be more competitive, and so we can give Manitobans a greater chance to find their financial goals and achieve the goals they have for themselves and for their families. Today, we announced that we'll begin the phasing out of the education property tax by 50% over the next 2 years, 25% this year on farm and residential properties. This will be hundreds of thousands of Manitobans will find that they have a little more money left over as a consequence of these changes. Removing the retail sales tax as well on personal services like your haircuts and salon services. Further reducing the vehicle registration fees. We dropped those by 10% last year. We're dropping them by another 10% this year. Some would say this isn't much, but it adds up, doesn't it? And I come from a family background where a few dollars on the kitchen table after you paid your taxes and your bills was a pretty good thing to have. And I think a lot of Manitoba families can relate to that, in particular as a consequence of some of the tough things that have happened as a result of this pandemic. I should mention also that we continue to index our basic personal amount. In other words, the amount that you have to earn before they start taxing you, we start taxing you, goes up every year according to the inflation rate. And so therefore, this leaves more money in the hands of, in particular, our low-income families. We're also indexing our personal tax brackets to inflation as well. So it should be mentioned that there is no longer this thing called bracket creep that used to exist for many years under previous administration. What this does is it leaves more money, in total hundreds of millions of dollars more money, with the people who work so hard to get it. With Manitobans who are working and struggling to make ends meet, they will struggle a little less as a consequence of some of these measures. With seniors who've worked hard all their lives to find some security, they'll have a little more security as a consequence of these measures today. And given the insecurities of COVID and the realities of this pandemic and what it's done to affect the lives of all of us in our province, I think this is the right time to give Manitobans a little bit of a break. Working families know the challenges, seniors know the challenges, all of us in small business, with small business experience, know the challenges. We faced them together through COVID. Cet allègement fiscal garantira que plus d'argent restera avec les familles manitobaines qui travaillent fort, surtout maintenant en ces temps difficiles quand c'est le plus nécessaire. Promise made, promise kept. Promise faite, promise tenue. Budget 2021 provides a realistic path forward towards balance. We have a projected deficit this year of over $1.5 billion. And we have to address that. We have created that deficit as a consequence of the fact that we will not stop addressing the healthcare needs, the support programs of Manitobans who are vulnerable. We also know that there's been an unprecedented drop in revenues from our economic shutdown, but we also understand that Manitobans are resilient people and we're projected to come out of this better than most. And that is a tribute to our diverse economy and the work that this government and Manitoba small businesses have done in tandem with one another to strengthen the opportunities for recovery. While there's much hope in the window with the vaccine shipments beginning to come in, Budget 2021 continues to address not just the short term, but the long-term health and economic needs of our province as well. It was announced yesterday, I'll say again, Budget 2021 provides $1.18 billion this year alone for COVID-19 costs such as personal protective equipment, vaccine deployment, education supports, and future pandemic needs too, because all of us see and are concerned about the possibility of additional variants that have struck already in most other parts of Canada, but have yet to be impactful here. We have to be ready because the possibility of them coming is very real. COVID-19's handed us new challenges, greater challenges than ever before, and I'm proud of the way Manitobans have risen to those challenges. This virus has challenged all of us, each of us, to become more resilient and more innovative and more determined than we ever thought was going to be necessary. And as a government, we'll continue to be guided and inspired by the character and the values of the Manitobans we love and respect. Their discipline guides us. Their foresight inspires us. And their compassion and their ability to work as part of a team has been proven, not just in this pandemic by bending the COVID curve down as Manitobans did, but throughout our history, and I believe it will be proven again as we move forward. Manitobans care about living within their means because they bear the consequences directly if that isn't the case. And I believe they respect and want to have a government that shops smart with their money that they take from them. Our government's going to shop smarter. We have been and we continue to. We're going to invest wisely. We're going to protect those most vulnerable and most in need. And we are going to move resources to the front line where they're needed, especially now with our education reform proposals. We need more money in the hands of classroom teachers, more money that can be inspired and used to inspire our children to find their success as they move forward in their lives. Just like Manitobans, your government understands the difference between wants and needs. And the needs over the past year have been and will continue to be to protect Manitoba's most vulnerable people, protect our healthcare system and our schools, protect Manitoba business owners, our communities, and our environment. Budget 2021 provides a roadmap that we will follow to continue to protect Manitobans from COVID-19, advance Manitoba past COVID-19 to a brighter and more prosperous future for us all. Be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our reporters on the line, you will have one preliminary and one follow-up question. Up first this afternoon from the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good afternoon, Premier. Josh Aldridge, Winnipeg Sun. Looking at the supports that have been talked about in the budget, there's a lot in terms of lowering taxes and wage subsidies, very similar to last year. Was there consideration for something more direct for business supports, like an extension of the bridge grant, as opposed to these wage subsidy programs to help small businesses currently shut down or still being greatly impacted by health orders?
There's consideration of a lot of things. We've got some additional, in addition to the most generous programming for small business that you referenced there, Josh, last year, the Bridge program, GAP program prior to that, Bridge program A, B, and C, as you know. We had some hiring incentives for small businesses, and I believe that with some of the recommendations, we're going to be enhancing and adding on those. Also, we've got some new programs to help our small businesses adapt to the new ways of doing business, new platforms for doing business electronically. And we've got some other initiatives that were recommended to us by our business advisory team that we're excited to see going forward as well. And we have, of course, underway right now, as you know, some support programs being administered for our hard-hit industries, the culture industries, the hotels, restaurant and food service companies. Those are all underway as well. And I should mention again, these are programs. These aren't so much handout programs as they are recognition of the vital importance of our small business community to creating jobs and opportunities, not just for themselves, but for all of us, for our children, for our grandchildren, so they have a great place to work and an opportunity to make their way in Manitoba.
A follow-up question. When we look at the potential for a third wave, looking at the provinces surrounding us, how much could that set, if we get with the third wave here in the next couple of weeks, how well are we prepared to address that through this budget, especially when we look at the issues with either it's getting the vaccine from the federal government or getting into the arms of Manitobans once it gets here? How well prepared are we to sustain or to keep the curve flat, as you like to put it, if we get hit with the third wave?
Yeah, we're dealing with unprecedented times. Excuse me for a sec, Josh. We're dealing with unprecedented times. The Brazilian variant scares the heck out of everybody. The present vaccines that are available are apparently less effective against that variant. We're seeing the reality of that variant appearing and rearing its head in parts of Canada, not least of all Alberta and BC recently. So you raise a really good point. We've set aside tens of millions of additional dollars in anticipation of the potential additional costs of that third wave, and of course we all hope that it's not coming. But as they say, you hope for the best, but you've got to prepare for less than that. And so that in addition to the already set aside $50 million to address some of the backlogs for additional surgeries in healthcare, the additional money that we've set aside for in support of our educational transitions to a more modernized, more effective education system. These are all evidence of the fact that we're thinking ahead, but we have definitely prepared for the worst in terms of the pandemic, and we'll continue to do that.
From CBC Manitoba, Ian.
Good afternoon, Premier. Ian Fraze with CBC. You've prioritized tax cuts throughout your time as the Premier, but now you're introducing taxes on digital services. Doesn't that make life more expensive for some Manitobans?
Yeah, it might. It makes the tax structure fairer to all, though. And this is why the federal government's already moved on it, as you know, and this is why several other provincial jurisdictions have, and I expect all will. So the present structure was a free ride for some and an additional unfair disadvantage to others. So we're changing it to fair up the system, and I'd say that it's look, it's been stated that I'm, don't like higher taxes, and I think that's probably generally true, but what I don't like is unfair taxes. I don't like taxes that place an unnecessary burden on people that's unfair. And I saw that with the previous administration when they raised taxes, after saying they wouldn't, raise taxes on so many things that Manitobans find essential, really. And so that's why we're taking the measures we are today to remove some of the tax burden on Manitoba families and individuals.
Thank you for that. And our long-term care homes really struggled in the second wave of the pandemic. Are there new initiatives in this budget to address that? And if so, what are they?
Well, there's actually $292 million set aside. A lot of that will be, to be fair, will be used at the St. Boniface ER expansion, but there's significant money in addition to that. I expect that's one of the budget envelopes that you might see accessed in terms of making some improvements to personal care homes. I have a call which is going in 10 minutes, and I'll apologize if I rush a little bit today with the Prime Minister, and on that call I expect we are going to be talking about what we can do together to strengthen the quality of care that's offered in our personal care facilities, because we know that throughout the country and around the world, this was a disproportionate, there's disproportionate hardship and death caused during this pandemic because of some of the issues that I think we must, and we owe it to our seniors to, do a better job of.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Good afternoon, Premier. In this budget, there's $100 million for the vaccination program. What can you tell people who are worried about the hiccups that we've seen in terms of staffing levels, in terms of volunteers being engaged? What can you tell people to assure them that this will translate into better service on the ground, a smoother operation, and more needles and arms?
Yeah, well, I guess there's two points I'd like to make on this, Steve. I said, and I've been accused of making excuses. I'm not making excuses. This is a historic undertaking. And frankly, if you do cross-jurisdictional analysis through your media contacts, you will find that the challenges that are being faced in Manitoba are being faced across the country of Canada in virtually every respect. So our vaccine team is hundreds of people who are coming forward to try to do their absolute best. So I defend that. I also don't like hiccups any more than anybody else does. And so let's be honest here. I mean, frankly, I don't like to see a technical problem cause a difficulty that leads to staffing problems which result in wait times that are insufferable for people. No one likes that. But I think, to be fair, this is not unique to Manitoba. It is a challenge the vaccine team is rising to, and I think that it's natural to focus on the problem, but it shouldn't be done to the exclusion of focusing on what's going very well. And what's going very well, in fact, according to many observers, is that we are getting more and more capacity moving forward, never as fast as some would like, to get more vaccines into people. Manitoba's not Surrey, we're not Scarborough. We have almost half our vaccines have gone to Indigenous folks in rural and northern settings. And so it isn't, fair, I don't think entirely, to say to the vaccine team, you got to get everything out of that fridge tomorrow, when in fact we are dealing with a very, very different situation than a lot of other Canadian provinces are. That being said, I understand that the reporting on vaccine delays is because we do a different method of reporting. Our vaccine team reports numbers only when they have verification that the vaccine is actually in an arm. Do they report it? And that's not how we're told other provinces report it. So we have an unequal portrayal of Manitoba's vaccine team not doing a good job. I'm told that they're addressing that so that Manitobans can get a more accurate picture on the rate at which vaccines are going into arms. I think that would be good, not for my sake, but I think it would be good for Manitobans to know that the vaccine program that people have worked so hard at is actually working pretty well.
And follow-up question, the debt to GDP ratio, we're knocking on 40% here, much, much higher than a few years ago. Second highest deficit, driven by the pandemic, obviously. But why are you opting for tax cuts at a time when there's tons of demands for extra services, and the bond rating agencies might be looking at the debt to GDP ratio?
Well, the debt to GDP ratio is an issue. That's why we're proud of the fact we brought it down, Steve, for the first time in a long, long time. But the fact also remains this pandemic has had real impacts on a lot of people, not just in terms of needing additional services, where we have in today's budget invested hundreds of millions of additional resources. It's also had a really, really hard effect on the fiscal situation that Manitobans have to address. Not everyone has a guaranteed job out there. We've got I'm told that we have close to 250,000 people who've experienced not all job loss, thank goodness, but income impacts that are very, very hard for them this year. And CERB ain't going to go on forever. So this province has an obligation to treat people fairly, and I think that taking our tax levels down to, they're hardly the lowest in Canada, they were among the highest when we came in, but taking them down a little bit is a not unfair thing to do. The major reduction, of course, as you note, is in taking the education tax off property. Well, basically, everybody else already did that, Steve. So frankly, I think we're just moving to a fairer, more reasonable way of supporting education in our province without punishing senior citizens for trying to stay in their own home a little longer or picking on farmers in rural Manitoba. So I like the idea of tax fairness, and I like very much the idea of getting our resources for education, for example, from the central tax base that we run here, and that is how, as I say, everybody else already does it that way.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Premier. I know this was already asked of the finance minister, but on the education property tax file, you're doing this big rebate over the next 2 years on for homes and farms. But do you have are you speeding up the timeline on the actual elimination of the tax bill?
No, we're taking a bite out of it Jeff, with the 50% on the residential and farm over the next 2 years, but there's more to be done. We made a commitment in the last election campaign. We're keeping it. We said when we moved to balance, we would begin to phase it out over 10 years. So this gets us a start on that. But I won't make a commitment today to when the rest of it will come off. I can only say that this is money that's going to, remember, this isn't money that's lost. This is being misinterpreted by the opposition parties for political reasons. This isn't money that's lost. This is money that stays with the people who worked to get it in the first place. It's not money that's lost. It's money that's going to be spent by families to support themselves. It's going to be put to good use in the homes of senior citizens. It's going to be put to good use in the hands of small business people in our own province. It's money that'll go back out into the economy and help us to recover from COVID.
You're offering, and similar, I guess, if the Fed already do this, you're offering this rebate for teachers who pay for school supplies out of their own pocket. Does it bother you that teachers have to pay out of their own pocket for supplies?
Doesn't bother me at all. As a former teacher, as the son of one, as the brother of one, as one who believes in public education, I've watched teachers invest their own money out of their own pocket for decades now. And I just think this is a good, fair incentive to encourage other teachers to do the same. There's lots of room for initiative. And teachers have initiative, and they've shown it through COVID. They've shown it in the way they've modified their methods of instruction. They've shown it in the way they are now able to recognize the uses of technology, for example, to be able to offer new opportunities for their students to learn. And I just think teachers are people who have, inspired me in my life, and I think that this is just a small way of indicating to teachers, use your initiative. There's something you want to purchase to help your students. Take a look at doing it.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, you're looking at a $1.6 billion deficit. The economy is a bit uncertain because of COVID. Don't you think that it's a little risky fiscally to offer these big rebates on education property taxes at this time?
I think it'd be risky not to. I think you've got significant realities out there that we're addressing, whether it's through the need to invest more as a consequence of COVID in healthcare or education or families, which we are doing in many ways, or the need to invest more significantly than in many, many years in infrastructure investment. But you also have those macro endeavors are going to help us to shore up the protections we need. But we also have to remember that there are micro economies in the households of our small business communities and in our working families and with our seniors in Manitoba that have been adversely affected too. And this is a way to make sure that we're addressing some of those COVID needs. And going forward, frankly, that we're into a more fair tax environment that I think is going to make us more competitive with other jurisdictions across Canada, Larry.
The $25 million committed to redeveloping the Bay, I'm just wondering how the government came up with that figure and whether it consulted other levels of government before making that decision.
Well, I understand that there's been dialogue with the City of Winnipeg already. I know that, and I can't speak to the detail of it, Larry. I know that my ministers have been meeting regularly with city representatives and with municipal representatives, I should mention, around the capital region, who also, and elsewhere in the province, who all have an interest, I think, in seeing us preserve in some appropriate manner the legacy of the history of our province as it's represented with the Bay. So I'm glad to see us make this commitment, and I would encourage other levels of government to also be at the table and having the dialogue about what the appropriate steps are as we move forward to see what we can do to preserve this iconic location.
Our final reporter this afternoon from the Brandon Sun, Colin.
Afternoon, Mr. Premier. I believe this was asked earlier, but I don't remember if it got a definitive answer. Last year, your government decided against lowering the PST a further percent because of COVID. Is that now off the table, or are you hoping to do so again in the future?
Well, Yeah, I mean, in the future maybe, but how long in the future remains to be seen. I think we're at least a few years away from getting back to a balanced situation. I think the remarkable achievement of my government and the team of people who've worked so hard here at the legislature and around the province to affect positive change has been that we've moved away from a billion-dollar deficit with rising taxes and flat supports for the vulnerable. We increased the supports for the vulnerable while lowering taxes and moving to balance. And that's a pretty incredible accomplishment, and I'm very proud of our team, and I'm especially proud today of the work of our finance department, of our Treasury Board department. Should mention them, the staff that have worked so hard throughout the year, members of Treasury Board, and of course of our Finance Minister, Scott Fielding, for his great work in preparing this year's budget.
My second question is, I know your government had said that Bill 64 would result in savings to the Asian system. Were those savings that you were hoping for compromised by the bill getting pushed to this fall in the legislature?
No, and I think that, quite frankly, this is a really important concept to understand. We have an administrative cost associated with delivering education that is 48% higher than Ontario by the most recent comparative studies, one of the highest in the country of Canada. We can find savings at the top and move those savings to the teachers in the classroom and help our children get a better opportunity to find their true potential, and I think that's really exciting. I would also mention that in making sure that we're activating those regional councils, and I'm very excited to see us do that. We're providing opportunities for parents or guardians, grandparents in some cases as well, from the community to learn about how they can help with improving their child's education. And there is one real important, indisputable fact when it comes to education, and that is parental involvement is a key. And the more we can encourage parental involvement, whether it's through new technologies, busy people are going to have challenges getting to a physical meeting at a school all the time. That doesn't mean that they can't go on the computer and participate and learn and contribute, ask questions. This is a really exciting opportunity for our communities to have a stronger voice in their child's education and greater involvement in it. And I don't buy the argument that some are making that if a family is poor, that they're not going to have those opportunities. I don't come from a rich family, but my parents valued education very much, and they made sure that their kids did. And I think we need to make sure that we believe in our parents and give them every opportunity to do the things that good parents can do, to assist their children in learning and growing and finding out what their real potential is in life. Thanks to everybody. It's an exciting day, and appreciate it. All the best to you in retirement, Larry.